kind of just start off the why to this, I've gotten several messages over the last really couple years, but specifically the last couple months on, Brian, it's getting harder to find, or I can't find a mechanic to work on my experimental or light support aircraft, you know, for several different reasons. And so I don't know if this is a growing concern or situation, but just to get a good cross section, we've got 7 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we've got 6 mechanics here this morning to open discussion this and hopefully give some ideas, shed some light on the situation. So unfortunately, they gave me a mic that's like 6 feet long. So I'm going to pass another wireless mic along to have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get into this discussion. So we'll start off right to left. So just hold this, just don't hit any buttons, and introduce yourself. And I'll hold it for you. 6 feet as well.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Montanes. I've been doing this aviation business for about 32 years now. I'm a certified flying instructor, twin engine rated. I'm also an aircraft mechanic with the IA rating. I'm also a aviation maintenance instructor as well. And I run a school in Kissimmee. And I'm trying to pump as many mechanics out as we can every day, but it is getting a little tough. But any questions, so please feel free.
Hey, good morning. I'm Trey Neville. I'm a maintenance shop owner, and I am not an A&P, but I've been in maintenance in some form or another for quite a time. And my background is flying as a pilot. I grew up in aviation, and so my background in business and flying led eventually through my passion with maintenance to open a maintenance shop. So I'm a maintenance shop owner. I run the business side of the house, but I don't actually do the A&P, the maintenance work. So I think I'm going to have a little different perspective from the business and the liability standpoint than maybe a lot of the rest of the panel. And hopefully we can get some good discussion here today.
Morris Smith with South Mississippi Light Aircraft / Legacy Aviation out of Southern Mississippi. We are a Rotex Master Repair Center for Rotex. We teach people how to work on the Rotex engines. We do a training session there 3 or 4 times a year. I'm an A&P-IA, and I'm here to help represent the Rotex side of it. Plus being an A&P-IA, we work on a lot of experimental aircraft. Some of the things that we see coming through the shop that we may or may not sign off over a period of time, and we've been doing Rotex for over 30-something years and over in Lucedale, Mississippi.
Good morning, I'm David Weber. I am an A&P-IA. Built a Sonics from plans. Flew that to Oshkosh in 2012. Managed to come home with some hardware to hang on the wall after that. Quickly started an RV-7 after that, which is now flying. Flown that to Oshkosh several times. I do a lot of maintenance work on both experimental and certified aircraft. And I've been employed by Dynon Avionics for the last 15 years, doing a lot of the mechanical design, product development design. Recently, I've switched over to instructional, so I'm the guy that goes out and gives all of the training for our certified installation centers on the certified side.
Good morning, I'm Philip Weaver. I'm from North Idaho, a little town called Bonners Ferry. I've been in aviation maintenance for about 4 years now. I've had my A&P for about 1.5 years. Where I work, just a small maintenance shop. We do about 40 annuals a year. And we get a mix of certified and experimental airplane through. I've had my hands in both, I guess. So, yeah.
Good morning, Herman Eshuis. I'm out of Lake City, Florida, originally from the Netherlands, here now since 2008. I own Wheels and Wings. It's a Zenith Builder Assist Center, and I am distributor for UL Power in the US, but also a Rotex certified mechanic. Been a light sport repairman since 2019, and I think probably the youngest A&P here, because I just got my A&P license in November, and I'm ticking off the time to get my IA in a couple of years.
Perfect. All right. So now that we got the introductions out of the way, I want to start off with let's start off with negative talk about this, because I assume that is what's going on. Why you're having a hard time finding somebody to work on it is the negative comments or negative issues. So I want to kind of bring this up to somebody who works primarily or mostly on certified aircraft, and somebody brings an experimental to them. So raise your hand on who wants to speak to that. Okay, I'm going to hand you the mic to record on there. So yeah, if you could explain some of your experiences, again, knowing that you work on certified a lot, somebody brings you an experimental, you look it over, like, what is the negative connotation to it?
So the negative side, because there is so much variety in how you can fix things and in what you can use, and the parts required are not strictly the FAA certified that have jumped through the FAA hoops for all the testing and everything else. The negative connotation to experimental world are the guys that look for the cheapest way that they can to maintain an aircraft, and they maintain based on a dollar sign, not maintain based on I guess airworthiness standards as the rest of aviation sees them. That's definitely the downside and the stigma, and I think probably a lot of times why, especially from a shop owner standpoint, when we get a new experimental aircraft in, and Naval Aviation predominantly works on certificated aircraft. We work on a double handful of experimental aircraft where the owners went to the experimental world to be able to find a way to get increased performance and increased safety when they could not get that from a similar certificated aircraft. To be able to replace old antiquated technology with newer, safer, more proven, more performance-based systems, that's kind of the customer base that we do a lot of work with. We occasionally will see one that kind of brings up the negative and the that downside to the experimental world where, so again, I said my background is in flying. Growing up at airports, talking with guys with experimental, I have absolutely heard guys brag about the fact that they would rob their lawnmower of parts to fix their airplane so that they could go flying. That mindset and that, path forward and that weight for airworthiness just doesn't lend itself to, I think, the general maintenance field wanting to take part in that. Because at the end of the day, when an A&P signs off, whether it's on any level, no matter how major or minor, when an A&P signs off work done on an aircraft, they are tied to that aircraft for the future. A lot of guys look at it for just the next year until the next annual or condition inspection, but it really goes far beyond that because you've now had your name in that logbook and you are now tied to that aircraft for everything that comes after that because you've signed it off as airworthy. You've created a precedent in that aircraft's history that is an okay aircraft based on how it's set up, what components are used, and anything to that effect. So the negative side is you can do pretty much anything that you want if it's an experimental aircraft within very few limitations. Compared to maybe the more positive side where you get to do whatever you want, being shoehorning in more safety, more capabilities than you could out of a certificated aircraft.
Dynon Avionics at Dynon.com, offering everything from state-of-the-art glass cockpit options to advanced control modules that power and control your entire aircraft. Gratia Aero Group at GratiaAero.com, proudly representing these best-in-class brands for experimental general aviation. Sherwings, BD Aviation, and MW Fly. KFA, Kitplanes for Africa, engineered for adventure and built for the bush is their motto, offering several STOL-kit aircraft options like the Expedition, Safari, Bush Baby, and Explorer. Find them online at kitplanesforafrica.co.za. Visit us online at experimentalaircraftchannel.com for all things DIY aviation. And consider supporting us on our Patreon page to help us bring you more original aviation content.
To go off of what he was talking about there, what we've seen in our shop also, from the Rotax side of it, that's what I mainly deal with is the Rotax engines. And we always said the two-stroke guys versus the four-stroke guys, talking about going cheap with stuff, is the two-stroke guys would always nickel and dime everything, and the four-stroke guys would always spend the extra money for the engines and go ahead and have the aircraft where it was in good shape. Now, the problem we have is, like he was saying, going the cheap route, they think that it's a toy at that point. It's experimental. It's more of a toy than it is a certified aircraft, and they want to use that as an excuse just to go to O'Reilly's or somewhere like that to buy parts for it to put on it. And as a Rotex mechanic over the years, we've had several crash investigations that we've done where the engine comes in and you see where the lack of maintenance has been done because they want to nickel and dime it so bad. Whereas in the certified world, you can't nickel and dime it so much. Now, the trade-off in being certified versus experimental is a certified aircraft, the insurance is a lot cheaper than the than the experimental side of it. Then when you go to get the insurance on an experimental, it's probably double or triple of what it would be on a certified version because of it being experimental, and they can use it for whatever, and the maintenance side of it comes into play with that. So I see a lot of what he's talking about, and I agree with everything he said about, you look at it as being cheap. And as a AMPIA and a mechanic, we look at the aircraft and we see shady stuff being done to it, and we will refuse to work to it. I've walked up to a plane before that I've annualed year after year after year and walked up to it and found the engine was not serviceable, and I said, I will not sign this engine off because you need a new engine. And we have the right to refuse the work to do that, even though customers get mad at me. He got mad at me, but ultimately he bought a new engine because we're looking out for the safety of not only you as a pilot and in your aircraft, but you will be taking individuals in your aircraft with you that weighs on us too. One of the engines we had come in off an experimental, the guy thought it was basically a toy, and he killed him and his girlfriend's daughter with him. So we've got to look out for the safety of everybody as we do this. And if we deem our aircraft as unfit for operation, then as a pilot and an owner, you should be able to respect our decision in that.
All right, anybody else want to speak to the negative side or negative experiences you've had working on either certified or experimental? Sorry.
So again, David Weber, and I would add to this that there seems to be a lot of confusion still to this day as to who is allowed to work on an experimental aircraft. I see this quite a bit. Matter of fact, to this day, I am still not sure exactly what the regulations allow and who is allowed to do it. But I would add that everything that is done on an experimental aircraft requires it to be logged and at some point signed off. Even if you are a second or third owner of that aircraft, yes, you may be allowed to work on that aircraft, but at some point that work has got to be signed off by an authorized mechanic. How that is done, I'm open to suggestions on interpretation at that point. But to me, that's where I see one of the biggest problems that we have right now on the experimental side is the confusion, and how we clarify that is something I'd like to see the entities step up and do a little bit more clarification on that.
Yeah.
So on a regular basis, we do engine changes, and they have to go to your 5-hour phase one. You have to go into a 5-hour phase one. When you have bought the plane somewhere, you have to get a phase one, you have to get a designated area, because phase one was initially given to the builder where he lives. So you need to have correspondence with the FAA. Based on making logbook entries, that is up to the owner if he wants to, but technically you only have to do an experimental once a year, condition inspection by either the builder or by an AMP. The light sport repairman rule is that you might not even do supervised maintenance with the owner. For an LSRM, you cannot supervise an owner assisting with the maintenance. That's specifically written in as for an AMP. If you get your light sport, your SLSA, I'm talking about SLSA, not ELSA. if an AMP does an SLSA, he can have the owner work. But as a light sport repairman, you cannot supervise an owner. There is a very clear statement in the law about that.
Good, good. All right, so we're going to start talking some of the positive things and then jump around some different questions that have come to me throughout this. So we're going to stay on topic, but I also want to bring in the positivity since we're just beating down experimental for a little bit here, right? So hold the mic there for a minute, Herman, okay? So if you could, in maybe about a 60-second to a minute and a half example, I know, the Instagram version, not the long YouTube version, right?
I don't do Instagram.
We got a good tell here. But just explain some of the positive experiences you've had working on experimental light sport compared to certified.
Being a Zenith Builder Assist Center, I'm assisting people finishing aircraft. I had the main reason for me to get my SLSA repairman certificate was to count my hours. You can sign off your own hours working on aircraft towards an AMP license. That is a big benefit, and it opened up a market for locals with an SLSA to get maintenance, to come over for maintenance. Actually, I'm in Lake City, Florida now. There are not that many people in northern Florida, so I did not do too much SLSA maintenance. But it's mainly experimental. Every plane we build is experimental, amateur built. So because I'm assisting, I provide commercial assistance to the builder. So I don't know how to get, how far am I, 45 seconds?
Well, more so just like, what are the advantages you see as the positive things? Like, you prefer to work on, obviously, prefer to work on experimental versus certified, and why did you choose this as a profession over working on certified aircraft?
Oh, that mainly the ease of just working on them. Because the saying is that every trunk monkey can work on an experimental. There is no standard, there is no guidance. It's actually really scary because you take a lot of liability by working on them. So I think if I...
So the very same thing that the certified guys are saying, the reasons not to, you're saying is the positive sides to work on it.
Whenever I work on a certified plane, I would rather not go and fly it, because if you step into 50-year-old technology and you put a screwdriver on the screw and it's already halfway disintegrated, the aluminum is gone. I've not flown a certified plane, I think, for the last 10 years because I don't trust them. It sounds really weird, but the experimental, and I agree, there are a lot of people who tinker, and if they use the Home Depot aviation department for their parts and stuff, yeah, that's not the ones I want to deal with.
And hardware only.
Yes, and I have to say, I'm at the high end of the build assist, because most people, if they want to build it themselves, if you want to have a good product, and of course I give myself a little credit here, I'm really meticulous, and it's not a cheap fixture. If they want it cheap, they need to go somewhere else. You cannot be safe and cheap. And I see what you say. I came out of, in Europe I was flying the two-stroke Rotax. I think I ended up 3 times in the field somewhere because the club was not maintaining it correct. But I don't want to be in them anymore. But I think if you overhaul one, it's safe. But you have to keep it to manufacturer specifications. And if you build a plane based on your 4313, what the FAA has, I call it the Bible of the workshop, then that's where your standards are. And they are open for interpretation, but you do not want to do an interpretation to going cheaper. No, you want to do the top, because your life is in there, and people take the family up. That's.
Okay. Let's get some more positive feedback here. Philip, you want to talk to this next?
Sure.
What is your positive experience with experimental so far in your career?
Yeah, from what I've seen, experimental aviation or experimental aircraft, when they're done correctly, they're tremendous airplanes. For example, we have one customer, he has an F-1 rocket, beautiful airplane, and he's very meticulous in how in the way that we maintain it as well. And so yeah, that's what I would say is the positive side of experimental. There's great airplanes with great performance at fairly low cost if you do it right.
I agree with Philip that you can have builders that are very meticulous, and those are the kind of people I like to work with myself. As a technical counselor with EAA, I go out and see a lot of airplanes that are under construction, and sometimes I have to have a serious talk with that builder about their quality of build. And for the most part, I say people are really receptive to that. They want to hear feedback, and that's why they're asking you to come out. So if you're building an airplane, or even if you are buying secondhand an experimental airplane, there are resources out there that the EAA provides, like the technical counselors. Use them. Now, to kind of back up a little bit on what the positive side of experimental is, to me, experimental is currently what is leading the technology push. I see this all the time. Avionics, especially working for Dynon, companies like Dynon that push the realm of the technology that eventually will make it into the certified side. So experimental really provides a way of proving, a proving ground for those new technologies that eventually we'll see in our experimental planes.
And we add to what David's saying here. To me, how I envision this is kind of like comparing this to automotive racing, where you've got like Indian Formula One, which is like the cream of the crop, and a lot of the stuff that they develop in Formula One racing trickles down into production, into automotive production cars. And I feel it's the same way in the experimental, because there is that freedom there to be able to kind of experiment, that eventually it will trickle down into a production product or service or something like that. But again, going back to the positive side, that's one positive to me I see as far as working in the experimental world. Morris, you want to speak to the positive experiences? You obviously have a tenure in this.
Well, the positive side of it, I've been in this industry for a long time. When I was 16 years old, I was flying people off this strip behind us out here in a Quicksilver. Now, back in those days, there wasn't a whole lot of mandatory stuff that went on. You could have mom and pop shops set up all over the place that were building aircraft. And those aircraft, they were selling to individuals all over the world, and a lot of them were not quality machines. They were not good machines, and people were getting killed in them, people were getting hurt in them. You know, then light sport came along and they narrowed it down to where you had a standard that you had to go by, the ASTM stuff. You had to go by a standard. And that took care of a lot of these mom and pop places that were building these aircraft that, you know, were shady companies and shady aircraft that were getting people hurt. And over the years, you've got companies that are out like Zenith and others, Kitfox. They have streamlined their experimental aircraft to more of a standard, to where you're going, when you see a Kitfox or a Zenith or Rands or whatever you get, it's basically they build it by the book. It's a standard, and it's a pretty good build at that point for being experimental. So the positive side of the experimental is we've got, this day and time, more quality, a better quality aircraft out there today than we did back, say, 20 years ago, when you'd come to this air show and you'd have somebody just showed up with something they just decided they'd build in the garage and they'd been flying, and trying to sell it to individuals saying, hey, look, this is a good aircraft. And those are the aircraft that we want to try to not have in the market. Now, one of the things that gets confused is, like, if we've got an older aircraft that was built in the late 80s, early 90s, those were experimental home-built aircraft. Now, as an LSRM, you cannot work on an experimental home-built aircraft. It has to be experimental light sport. So to go to a qualified mechanic to be able to work on that, you need to make sure that it's registered properly as a light sport if you got an LSRM that's going to want to work on it for you. Now, and that's a positive, because that puts it as a newer aircraft. It's got a newer build. It'll be more set in stone. And the positive for me on working on an experimental over the certified is I've got more parts available to me. I can, if I see something that needs to be fixed on the aircraft, I can go over to my parts base of material I have at hand and make a component that is structurally sound and structurally capable of being replaced on the experimental and fix it then, versus like Herman was saying, flying a 50-year-old airplane that you can't even find parts for anymore in the certified world. So that's my positive on working on the experimental, and I'm able to correct things on the experimental aircraft that I cannot correct on, say, a certified aircraft. That, you know, there's an old wore out component here and there's a better component out there, but I can't truly put that better component on the certified because it has to go back to the old outdated technology.
Not without spending $10,000 in paperwork for FAA PMA.
Correct.
Trey, you want to speak to this as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Green light still on there?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure I'm capturing this for everybody at home too.
So to kind of touch on that and continue to move forward off of that, one thing that we've seen, even with our certificated customers, we haven't committed to the projects yet, but we're working with a DAR, an FAA designated airworthiness representative, and two of our aircraft owners that have legacy aircraft. We're talking aircraft that are well beyond the 50. We're looking at almost, one of them almost 80 years old, still in fantastic shape, flies every day, but as FAA rules and regulations get more complex, as airspace develops and gets busier and more complex, these customers that want to utilize these legacy aircraft that, you know, are looking for another generation of flight to let these aircraft fly for many more years. They're in great shape, they've been properly maintained, but they're not equipped the way that they need to meet the mission of the next generation. So one of the things we're working with is a project to convert from certificated aircraft to experimental, so that we have the option of, again, like kind of what we've talked some about before, being able to shoehorn in some added safety, some added performance, and a way to, with new avionics that may not be STC'd for these legacy aircraft, be able to bring legacy aircraft up to modern safety and modern specifications to fly for another generation of flight. So there's a, you know, the positive, one of the huge positives of the experimental world is being able to add technology, add safety that just is not available in any other form unless you're experimental. So that's a huge positive for the experimental world. I'm a huge fan overall of experimental when it's progressing, when it's developing, when you take that Formula One approach, as you said, that example, and it's amazing what people can do. There are a lot of, even going back to the amateur builders and amateur designers, when they are properly trained and when they're dedicated to safety and furthering aviation, you know, it's amazing what can be done in the experimental world. So,
Alex, we'll talk about your experience and also maybe what you see in the classroom.
Yeah, so I want to say something positive about the experimental world. Actually, the first airplane I ever touched was a Quicksilver MX-2. So we were putting the little fold, they call it, you know, the wings, and get it all fabric ready. But I think the positive is that technology and variety, because even the most simplest companies nowadays, they start using solid modeling to actually design this aircraft. And the variety, you can have all kinds of aircraft. You want, you know, seaplanes, bush planes, all kinds of aircraft that are out there. I think you got a better variety of those. And the safety factors, like all the gentleman says, safety factors is actually already integrated on it. And the flying costs, I think back in the early 2000s, late 90s, it was speed and miles per gallon, right? Pretty much. So you can have an airplane that's going 200 miles an hour and 3-4 gallons per hour. Nowadays, it's just the fat tire guys. They want to go slow and low. So, it's just that perspective from myself that, you know, you buy a certified aircraft right now, it's, you know, $500,000, and the design was done 40 years ago. So even if it's new, it's still 40-year-old design, you know, going at 120 miles an hour versus some of these other aircraft that, you know, you can get for a fraction of the cost, still a little bit higher than I kind of want. However, you get better technology and newer technology. So, and you say from the classroom standpoint?
Yeah, talk about the budget for a second. So where's the positive side of
Yeah, the
maintenance?
The positive side of maintenance, I'm particularly, since I'm a proponent of GA and a big GA guy, grew up on it. I tried to convert a lot of these newer guys to the GA era, and I've been successful so far. The only thing that kind of a semi-negative side is that the airlines are killing the A&P world just because they are offering so much more money, to work gravy shift and basically go to sleep half of the night. So not many people are going to the experimental world. However, or the GA world. Whoever is going to the GA world, and hopefully you guys agree with me, are way better versed mechanics, because if you go to a place or a bigger place like airlines, they digest everything for you. They give you an iPad and you do your work. We have to actually go and dig on the ADs and pretty much figure everything out. And that's how I basically teach and train my guys to actually have that quality, of training, that they will do pretty much everything from A to Z and are able to actually go and pick and choose which field, but I'm trying to push them more to GA, so as much as I can.
So another very specific question that has come up a couple times is, I want to go get this aircraft. I haven't flown it before. It's unique. Let's say it's like a composite long easy or very easy or something like that, or one of those type of aircraft, and say, well, go find somebody, or I know a Joe Schmo that is very airframe specific, a guru, if you will, in this. So, have him go with you, or have him check it out. So that can't be a positive thing, but that's also been a negative thing over the years too. That somebody thinks that they know everything specific to that aircraft, and maybe not the standards of aircraft. Does anybody want to speak to that experience of knowing of a guru that maybe wasn't the best, or maybe it was the best? I guess I'll throw my hat in the ring on that one.
Yes, so I've seen, I guess, both sides of that equation. I've seen there are absolutely in certain airframes, particularly more on the certificated side, the certified aircraft, there are some gurus out there that have the A&P background, the IA background, have worked in general aviation and or business aviation for a long time, know and are really good with the actual base standards and what's required, and they have gone on to specialize in a particular airframe, have seen a high volume of those aircraft through decades, where they've seen the points of failure, where they've seen these other things, and they can absolutely, their opinions, their values are their valuations of an aircraft, their, what they weigh in, that is worth its weight in gold. There are also, on the other end of that spectrum, there are guys that maybe didn't have the maintenance background, came through another background where maybe they just had years of experience, they had maybe even decades of experience without having the formal training and the maintenance practice, as their history and as their base skill set, and they're considered to be gurus. I would say that in a lot of cases, those guys are gurus in maybe systems design and maybe some concepts with the aircraft, but we've gotten several aircraft through our shop where the pre-purchase, the pre-buy was done by a guru that we get in, and it's a train wreck when you open it up, because the basic maintenance portion of the wear and tear on that aircraft was not there. It had the upgrades, it had the systems, it was the quote unquote right year model. It had the overarching, from a pilot standpoint, the overarching, this is what you're looking for when you buy this airframe, but it did not have the base care from the maintenance standpoint coming forward.
So let me cut in for a second. So what you're saying is essentially this guru person might have airframe specific, meaning the airframe, the metalwork and that kind of stuff, but maybe not the systems, electrical, plumbing, engine work and that kind of stuff of any other aircraft. But just, they built an airframe, so they know all the corners of the airframe.
Right. I see it more on the certificated side because, again, we do...
And being a good stick flying it.
Exactly. So, and that's another, that could be probably its own forum. The difference between what pilots see from the pilot standpoint, what I saw, in my background coming through the pilot ranks, and what people in the maintenance world see, maintainers, as they come through the maintenance ranks. And I never knew really until I got very heavy into maintenance and opened a maintenance shop. I never knew how much I didn't know about maintenance as a pilot. It's been very eye-opening seeing things from the maintenance standpoint. So when you have, particularly because we just see a higher volume of certificated aircraft. So that's kind of my background in saying this. But a lot of the gurus are gurus from the pilot standpoint. They know, hey, this year model, they changed this system and this is a better system. And they can evaluate systems and the macro. But when you get down to the micro, this hose is in terrible condition. This fastener is not airworthy. These other things, when you get down to the maintenance standpoint, the day-to-day, is this aircraft airworthy? It may be a shining example from a systems standpoint, and from someone that knows the airframe may say, hey, this is the right year, these were the right systems, and this has the right mods. But if they don't know the basic maintenance practices, you can still get hurt on that purchase.
Okay, so to sum up my question and then his answer, it sounds like in reality it would be safer to have a bit of both. If there is a guru that you can have access to call up and ask questions, maybe even bring the aircraft to, speak to him about that, get all the information, but then also, secondary, hire an A&P to go through the systems and the general practices, because these are unique aircraft. They're not high production number aircraft, so you might have to take a few more steps. So does anybody else want to speak to that? I'm going to go to the next question.
So a lot of you may know me, Morris Smith, my dad, Ronnie Smith. We are considered somewhat the gurus on the Rotax side of stuff. With that being said, as he's talking about systems and stuff, we specialize in the Rotax engine, and my dad, Ronnie Smith, goes back to the beginning of the four-stroke engines, and we can see those things that you're talking about over the years. We can walk up to an aircraft and we can see, all right, well, this is this year model engine and it's going to need these components replaced on it. And as a guru with that, we can see that, and we try to give that to individuals around us in the light sport industry, because it's not on the certified, it's on the experimental side of it. And Brian brought us an engine too. It was like, well, Brian, this engine here has things that need to be done to it. So, but on the
let me speak to that for a second. I bought an engine for a great price, found it on Barnstormers, saw a video of it running. It ran good, it sounded good, and all that kind of stuff. And from the outside, it was a good deal. To go and bring in somebody who actually knows something about things and open up a few little things, like, nah, that's got some scorching in the cylinders, something going on in the gearbox, and it ended up needing to be topped, and the gearbox needed to be rebuilt. And I thought I was getting a good deal. So
he's still got a good engine, don't get him wrong. He's got an outstanding engine that he has now. But being able to take it to someone, your airframe, your engine, whatever, take it to somebody that knows those systems, like you're talking about, like the Dynon systems and stuff. I'm not an expert in avionics, so when I have an aircraft that needs that, I send it specifically to, and by the way, Ronnie Smith just walked in the door. So I send it to somebody that can handle that. I basically do firewall forward for Rotaxes because that's what I specialize in. And as far as airframe stuff, I'll send the airframe to somebody that specializes in airframes, an A&P that specializes in airframes, so he can go through the airframe with a fine-tooth comb, because I'm more of an engine guy than I am. But going to somebody that specializes in a guru in that field is real critical, and making sure that they go through it with a fine-tooth comb is very critical.
I'll roll on to combine two questions I have into one, and that is, somebody buys an aircraft, they didn't build it, and it's experimental light sport, and they bring it to somebody, and maybe Trey looks at it and says, I can't touch that one. Or, same thing with Herman. He looks at it and is like, yeah, I've built a few of these and I'm not going to touch it. How can they then go home with their tail between their legs and correct the problem? How can they make it more attractive to an A&P that will want to touch it? And to piggyback on that, obviously EAA is a great foundation, the EAA chapters and so forth. Do you think that there's enough wisdom and knowledge in our chapters and the inspectors that they could kind of chime in on this too to help that particular person bring it up to speed and then bring it to as a final test, you know, to get it to sign off? Like, what would make it more attractive?
Just takes money.
Just throw money at it and it becomes more attractive to you?
Well, you got to get somebody to go in there and fix it
This is not the guy I
all.
want to talk to you then. This is not. Money doesn't solve problems.
Well, I mean,
Oh.
to fix it correctly, it takes money to take all these components to fix it, and you need to get involved with somebody that knows your aircraft or is willing to go online and get all the details you need to start working on that particular aircraft, so that you can start bringing it back into an aspect where an A&P will want to start back working on it, because they are.
Anybody else want to chime in on the that question too, or you don't want to touch it?
So my advice would be, A, if you're thinking about buying an airplane, before you buy it, you find somebody that you know you can consult with. And that is your local EAA chapter. If it's experimental, get involved with them. You go to a meeting, they're more than helpful, might at times be over helpful. You might have to hear about a few hernia operations now and then, but you're going to get a lot of good advice from your local EAA chapter, and they're more than happy to come over and take a look or give you advice on that aircraft. Now, when you buy something that's unique like a Hummel, you're going to find that finding those experts is going to be hard to come across. A Vans, a Zenith, a Sonics, you're going to find that aircraft is going to be something that is going to be a lot more easier to find that local expert before you make that purchase. But before you make the purchase, before you have to tuck your tail after finding out that the plane is in ill repair, don't make that purchase without getting some advice somewhere. I can't emphasize that enough.
I approve this message.
Yes.
I think that's really the right approach. If you find something that's a great deal on Barnstormers or on Marketplace or something like that, and it's a basket case, and that's what a lot of times we'd call this, is a basket of parts. You can't expect to bring it to a mechanic like, hey, sign this off for me. Like, no, you just bought a box of parts. It looks like an airplane. So yeah, if you can do that ahead of time, then you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble downstream. Anybody else want to speak to that?
One thing I will say, like, I guess one thing that comes up is the definition. You know, an owner thinks an airplane's okay. The A&P looks at it and says absolutely not. And there can be some big disagreements there. So one thing there I would say is, for somebody who's looking to buy an experimental aircraft, build that relationship with your A&P beforehand. Get to know them well, take them coffee or donuts. A&Ps love donuts. And yeah, so that will just help smooth things out so much more, you know. And even between A&Ps, I'm sure all of us would look at an airplane, we'd have different opinions on it. So yeah, if you are an owner looking to buy, consult with not just one A&P, consult with multiple A&Ps, get second, third opinions, and build those relationships. And I'll just say that for us A&Ps, don't be scared to build relationships with owners. Let's keep these airplanes in the air and let's keep them safe.
But in the end, it always turns up that it costs more money. That is for sure. But your EAA chapter we should totally pursue the whole EAA. There is so much knowledge in there. That's spot on from David. But if it's wrong, it's wrong. So it has to be fixed. And either you do it in the chapter, you get volunteers to help, or you go to a shop or to somebody who provides services, but it's going to cost money. And even if the labor is for free, you still have to buy parts. And sometimes you have to disassemble a quarter of an airplane to fix something where they have all the holes double drilled or whatever. I see that so many times. And so, well, you just don't put a piece over it. I said, no, you don't want to do it right. Because it's the same as what Morris said. I think what Morris or your neighbor, once you sign it off, your name is in that logbook, and if you do an ill repair, it might all be okay, but then the next person looks at it and says, wow, he does crappy work. We're not going to call him when something has to be done. So it's about having your own back, more or less, too, your protection.
Green light still on there?
Yep. And I agree with all of you guys. Pretty much took a lot of the stuff that I wanted to say, but in my experience is that when they get to me, it's almost not necessarily too late. But most people try to get somebody. Oh, my buddy's an AMP. He can do it. And in my opinion, with all the respect to all AMPs, not all AMPs are experts on experimental aircraft. So, and to you guys' point, I think they need to get really in the ball and get oriented. I want to join the EAA and get the people that are actually experts on that type of field, rather than just, hey, my buddy's an AMP, he'll do it. And I done a second pre-buy inspection in a lot of aircraft, and I'm thinking you should not have paid that much, or maybe not even bought this airplane at this point in time. But my buddy checked them. I was like, well, I don't think he knew what he was looking for. Not that he was a bad AMP, just that he's not as familiarized with the type of aircraft that he was looking at. So,
yeah, real quick. And yeah, to kind of circle back, because I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. The one thing, going back to the question, if you find yourself in a situation where you did buy a basket case and you are looking to have things fixed and get back to flying, to kind of reassure the AMP or the shop that's going to do the work, if you approach them with the standpoint of, hey, I clearly now have gotten in a pickle. I did not realize that I was buying one that it was going to need this. How do we fix it to make it right? Just starting with that simple, with that way of, hey, build me a roadmap forward to correcting what issues are found. I think that reassurance, I don't think anybody can fault somebody, when you bought what you shouldn't have bought. If you're in a bad position, I don't think anybody can fault you for wanting to make it right. I mean, if you want to make it right, but you need a roadmap because you clearly didn't realize that you were buying that, so you don't know the way forward to make it right. So if you do find yourself in that situation, just simply going at it from the standpoint of, this needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed right. I'm going to take my family. I'm going to take my friends. We need to have an airworthy aircraft. Let's proceed from here. So,
all right, just to add to what you're saying there, so in reality, to the buyer, to the owner out there that has purchased this aircraft, you don't know what you don't know, right? So nobody's going to really pick on you about that. This is a learning environment, if you will, right? What we will pick on you and be upset about is you try to sell it to somebody else as a good thing, knowing you found out something that was a basket case or whatnot. And I would say that just know yourself too. You think you have the ability, you found a deal, you're like, the reason why you got such a good price is because it's going to need a lot of work, right? Nobody wants to lose money on an aircraft kit, right? Especially a new kit that they started messed up, and they invested now $30,000 and it's up on the chopping block for 20, and they ended up selling it for 10. Nobody wants that to happen, but you have to know your own abilities, and you have to be honest with yourself. If you can't perform the work, you can't afford to have somebody else do it, then you have to make a decision. Sell it, get some of your money back, or pay somebody to fix it. I'm going to roll. I know we're kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to wrap up a few more questions. Somebody's brand new to this, they just bought an aircraft, and they don't know this experience of this panel here of how to get an aircraft, what we call a condition inspect on an experimental. What should they expect on a condition inspection? And give me your honest opinion. I know I would love to be involved in the process. I was a little bit in my engine because I like to learn about it. I like to be hands-on learning of having the customer come in to work with you during a condition inspection, not to get in the way, because they often do, but to learn about their aircraft. And would you charge extra for that? Or as long as they're just opening panels and watching, can somebody speak to this?
Well, what I was going to follow up with just a while ago was attitude. The individual's attitude to us makes a big difference on how we're going to present to them on how we're going to take care of their aircraft. If they want to come help us with it, their attitude, how they can't come to us and say, well, I want this done, I want that done, or if they come in like he was talking about, can you please help me, and have a good attitude toward the whole process, that goes a long ways. Like he was talking about donuts, that goes a long ways. And as far as helping with an aircraft, I love for individuals to come in to help me with their aircraft because they fly the plane. they know their aircraft. They know what they're seeing when they're flying the plane. All right, if they've got certain sounds and stuff, I like to hear that input. You know, all right, let's look at this on the plane. Let's look at that on the plane. Let's see if we can straighten out what you're hearing, what's going on with it. I welcome it, and most people say they want a 10% more on when somebody comes in to help you. But the attitude to me of somebody coming in is worth a lot. And like working on an airplane, you know, with your attitude coming in, like I've got this basket case. A lot of people donate parts to somebody like that, and to just help them out.
So my shop is probably pretty unique because the customers work in the shop. I work with customers. If we do a condition inspection, mostly it's with previous builders. But we work side by side. If they slow me down, I only work on an hourly rate, so if they slow me down, it costs a little bit more money. But they mainly they want a second pair of eyes through it. That's the main thing is that, well, we worked on it the last year. I did my maintenance before the condition inspection, just an extra pair of eyes. And normally it maybe takes 10 hours or maybe 8. Well, it probably costs an hour longer because they have their family stories. That's what David said when you're with the EA chapter. You might hear more than what you talk about. Well, I cannot really complain about it. It's also, you're a counselor. You are like their shrink. And it's actually way cheaper to have an aircraft mechanic as a shrink than to go to a real one, is what people say. So it's actually a day, it's a great day to just overlook your aircraft again. So I'm not charging extra. It's my regular rate. But it takes longer if the customer is around.
So I'll speak on this real quick, which is we're all aware of recently the FAA came down with the MOS decision, which really put a crimp in owner assisted annuals. And fortunately there were some big names, Mike Bush himself, who got behind rescinding that order, which made it a lot easier for guys like me who do a lot of owner-assisted annuals and condition inspections. I have no problem helping and educating an owner of an airplane. Matter of fact, I look at that as something that is better off for the entire industry, not alone that relationship I have with him, because essentially it's his butt that's going to be sitting in that plane. That owner is typically the person that has got the most invested in making sure that aircraft is flying the best. So if it takes a little bit extra time, I don't know of an A&P that won't take that extra time to help somebody get it done right. Of course, things cost money, time is money, but at the same time, there's not an A&P out there that I know of that's worth their salt that will not help an owner get something right on their aircraft. And the last thing I'd like to say, because I know we're wrapping up, is hey, thanks to Brian for bringing this panel together. Really appreciate you and your channel and everything you've done for the experimental world.
I appreciate you guys taking the time to share your experiences with this. So kind of in closing, just a few more things. I know if you're watching this at home, you probably clicked on this and wanted the absolute answer. Unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet answer to fix this problem, but maybe this gives you a better understanding as things to think about as to the why it might be more difficult to find. In reality, to give you a couple hints, if there isn't somebody in your local airport or local zip code, you may actually have to bring the aircraft out of states. To wherever somebody is familiar with the aircraft or willing to work on it. I live in a very rural area myself, and there isn't a whole lot of options. There are a couple, but initially there wasn't. So you might have to go very far. As an example, I drove 4.5 hours to go visit Morris to look at my Rotax engine because his experience and so forth. So just have that expectation. You might have to travel someplace to have. Again, these are like kind of like Formula One vehicles. Like not everybody knows how to work on it. So you're gonna get in the game. This is just kind of how it is. But to add to that, I'm going to add a link to everybody's here. Get in touch with them. And if you have any questions specific, you can email them directly across the board here to get in touch with them. And then the great thing about aviation is networking. If they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge on that specific one, you probably know somebody that does. So that's how this works. We like to help each other out. And I'm sure everybody here, if they can't do it, they will help you find somebody, or at least name drop a few people that can help you along your way. And we've talked individually a little bit, obviously off camera before this forum started, about the need for this. I'm kind of working through that in my mind too, of like, could we create a vetted list somehow, state by state, and slowly grow that so people do have a resource to go to online, or at least start somewhere. So through this conversation, this idea came to me ultimately through a patron of ours that said that you should do a roundtable. So this is not a roundtable, but it is a forum discussion. But I have back in mind an idea that maybe we could somehow create a growing list of vetted mechanics that are willing to work on experimentals and so forth. So anyway, the people that are sitting here, thanks for joining us right at home. Thanks for watching, and we'll do more of this. So thanks, everybody.